You know, remember like back in the day when we were kids, we used to hear those crazy stories
Oh, yeah.
like Bigfoot and
Loch Ness
the
Monster.
Loch Ness Monster. Yeah, all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Well, today we're doing a deep dive on a real life figure
Mm-hmm.
whose legend rivals any of those myths.
Right.
Grigory Rasputin,
Rasputin, yeah.
the mad monk of Russia.
I think what's so fascinating about him is that his image has almost become this caricature, right? Almost like a cartoon villain in a way.
Yeah.
But to understand his story,
Yeah.
I think you really have to kind of look beyond the sensationalism,
Yeah.
delve into the historical context, the social dynamics,
Right.
and really the very real anxieties that gripped Russia in the early 20th century.
Absolutely. And we've got a stack of sources for you today. Biographies, historical analyses, even some accounts from people who knew him personally. So it's a wild mix of facts, rumors, outright fabrications, which I guess is kind of the point.
Absolutely. I mean, separating truth from fiction is a key part of understanding not just Rasputin. Yeah.
But also how historical narratives are constructed and how they're often manipulated for personal or political gain.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning. Rasputin, he wasn't born with a silver spoon in his mouth.
Right.
He was a Siberian peasant, a world away from the palaces and the power struggles of St. Petersburg.
Yeah, I mean, his early life was marked by hardship, which was a reality for so many in rural Russia at that time.
Right.
And I think this experience, coupled with his deep religious faith, likely shaped his worldview and his later turn to mysticism.
Yeah, I remember reading about his pilgrimage to a monastery. Was that kind of a turning point for him? Did it ignite that like mystic persona?
Yeah, it seems to have been a pivotal experience for sure.
Okay.
Upon his return, he really cultivated this image of a wandering holy man, someone who renounced worldly possessions and dedicated himself to spiritual pursuits.
But it wasn't all prayer and fasting, though.
Right.
Our sources kind of hint at some, let's say, unconventional practices.
There were accusations of sexual misconduct?
Certainly rumors of unorthodox rituals,
Yeah.
particularly involving female followers.
Right.
And he preached about resisting temptation,
Yeah.
but conveniently seemed to exempt himself.
So a bit of a contradiction there. But somehow this all just added to his mystique.
Absolutely. He understood the power of perception. He used gossip, both positive and negative, to his advantage. And so he really became this enigmatic figure, attracting both devoted followers
Right.
and scandalized critics.
So that brings us to his arrival in St. Petersburg. Talk about a culture clash, a Siberian mystic in the glittering court of the Tsar. How did he manage to navigate that world?
He was a very shrewd social climber.
Okay.
He strategically ingratiated himself with those who held influence, ultimately gaining access to the highest circles of Russian society.
And that included the Tsar and Tsarina, right? But why would they, I mean, these are the rulers of a vast empire, be drawn to this, shall we say, controversial figure?
Their desperation played a key role. Their son, Alexei, the heir to the throne, suffered from hemophilia,
Right.
a condition that prevented his blood from clotting properly.
So a life-threatening illness, really, with no known cure at that time. I can only imagine their anguish as parents.
Absolutely. They were desperate for a miracle.
Yeah.
And in Rasputin, they saw this glimmer of hope. He claimed to have healing powers.
Right.
And there are accounts of him seemingly alleviating Alexei's suffering.
Did he actually possess some kind of healing ability?
Right.
Or was it all just a clever act?
Right.
Our sources present some pretty conflicting views on this.
It's a question that historians still debate.
Yeah.
Some argue that he may have understood the power of suggestion,
Okay.
perhaps combined with some basic folk remedies.
Yeah.
Others believe it was purely coincidental,
Right.
that Alexei's condition would have naturally fluctuated.
But the Tsarina, she was convinced of his powers, right?
Absolutely. She saw him as this divine messenger sent to protect her son. And this unwavering faith in Rasputin, coupled with his growing influence, fueled public distrust and scandalous rumors.
And those rumors were only amplified by the leaked letters, right, between Rasputin and the Tsarina.
Yeah.
Some even whispered that Rasputin was Alexei's true father.
Those paternity rumors were unfounded based on the historical evidence we have.
Right.
But the fact that they circulated so widely really speaks volumes about the public's perception of Rasputin
Okay.
and the Tsarina's judgment.
It created a perfect storm then, didn't it?
Yeah.
the Tsar and Tsarina clinging to this glimmer of hope for their son,
Yeah.
while the public saw Rasputin as this manipulative figure corrupting the very heart of the monarchy.
Yeah, this tension, this clash between faith and reason really played a significant role in both Rasputin's rise
Hmm.
and his eventual downfall. He became this symbol of everything that was wrong with the Russian Empire, a lightning rod for discontent and unrest.
Now, speaking of his downfall, our sources mention a final prophecy letter
Yeah.
that Rasputin supposedly wrote. It predicted, didn't it, the Romanov family's demise if he were to be harmed.
That letter is widely considered a fabrication,
Okay.
likely created after Rasputin's death to heighten the drama surrounding the Romanovs' tragic fate.
Sure.
It's a great example of how history can be rewritten,
Right.
reshaped to fit a particular narrative.
So we've got a controversial mystic, a desperate royal family, and a public that's increasingly distrustful of their rulers. It sounds like the stage is set for a pretty dramatic confrontation.
And that confrontation takes the form of a meticulously planned assassination,
Okay.
orchestrated by Prince Felix Yusupov,
Right.
a man who truly believed he was saving Russia from Rasputin's corrupting influence.
And that's where we'll pick up in part 2 of our deep dive. We'll delve into the chaotic details of Rasputin's final hours,
Okay.
the assassination attempt that became a legend in itself.
Sounds good.
But before we get there, I want to talk about that, that peculiar artifact that's become almost synonymous with Rasputin's name.
I know what you're talking about.
The one on display in St. Petersburg.
Oh, yeah.
The infamous pickled penis.
Well,
Not exactly dinner table conversation,
right.
but definitely a testament to Rasputin's enduring, albeit somewhat salacious, legacy.
It is really a symbol of how his image has been exploited and distorted over time, often for shock value or just to perpetuate this myth of the mad monk.
I think it's also a good reminder that history is often this blend of truth and fabrication, shaped by those who tell the tale.
Right.
And with a figure like Rasputin, separating fact from fiction can be a real challenge.
It really can.
But I guess it's part of what makes his story so compelling,
Well,
right?
it is.
It forces us to question our assumptions, to dig deeper,
Yep.
Consider the multiple perspectives and motivations at play.
Absolutely.
So if you're as intrigued by this tale of ambition, scandal, and mystery as we are, be sure to subscribe and join us for part 2, where we'll unravel the events that led to Rasputin's dramatic demise.
I'll be here. All right, so last time we left off with Rasputin at the height of his influence and notoriety, a real polarizing figure in a deeply divided Russia. And his enemies, they were convinced he was a threat to the empire.
Yeah.
Started plotting his downfall.
And this is where Prince Felix Yusupov enters the picture, right?
Exactly.
Becomes obsessed with getting rid of Rasputin, believing
Yeah.
that he was saving Russia from this evil influence
Right.
as he saw it.
Yeah, Yusupov was a very complex figure, driven by this mix of patriotism, ambition, maybe even a touch of jealousy.
Yeah.
He saw Rasputin as this symbol of moral decay that he perceived in the Tsar's court.
So he hatches this plan to eliminate Rasputin.
Right.
What was his initial strategy? Did he try and discredit him publicly, or did he just go straight for the, more permanent solution?
Well, initially, Yusupov tried to recruit others to his cause, but many feared the consequences of directly challenging Rasputin.
Right.
They knew the Tsarina's devotion to him was unwavering,
Yeah.
and any attempt to harm him could backfire.
So Yusupov decides to take matters into his own hands.
Yeah.
And our sources describe this elaborate scheme involving a late-night invitation to Yusupov's palace. Sounds like something out of a spy thriller.
It does. The plan was to lure Rasputin under the pretense of a social gathering,
Okay.
a chance to meet some of his admirers,
Right.
so to speak. And Yusupov really carefully orchestrated this whole setting,
Yeah.
creating this atmosphere of opulence and intrigue.
But what was the actual method of dealing with Rasputin?
Yeah.
I mean, was it just a straightforward assassination, or did you have something more elaborate in mind?
Well, Yusupov's initial plan involved poison.
Okay.
He had prepared food and wine laced with cyanide, a very potent and fast-acting toxin.
Right.
And the idea was to make Rasputin's death appear natural, perhaps as a result of his rumored excessive drinking.
Yeah. But things didn't quite go according to plan, did they? I mean, the story of the poison cakes
Right.
and Rasputin's apparent immunity has become almost legendary.
Yeah. According to Yusupov's account,
Yeah.
Rasputin consumed a significant amount of the poisoned food and wine,
Okay.
but He showed no ill effects.
So that raised some questions. I mean,
Right.
did the poison lose its potency? Was there a miscalculation in the dosage?
Right.
Or was there something more to Rasputin's seemingly superhuman resilience?
Right. There are some sources that speculate that maybe one of the co-conspirators, maybe they got cold feet and
Oh,
switched out the poison at the last minute.
interesting.
Others suggest that the story of Rasputin's immunity was maybe exaggerated by Yusupov
Yeah.
to add to the drama of
Right.
the event.
Right.
It's certainly a detail that has fueled the myth of Rasputin.
Yeah.
This idea that he possessed some sort of supernatural resistance to harm.
Right.
But without conclusive evidence, it remains one of the many mysteries surrounding his death.
So with the poison seemingly ineffective, what was Yusupov's next move?
Well, panic kind of set in. Yusupov, realizing that his carefully crafted plan was unraveling,
Yeah.
made this very drastic decision. He decided to shoot Rasputin.
And he did, right.
Yeah.
Point blank range. If I remember correctly, you'd think that would be the end of it.
You would think.
Single gunshot, case closed.
Right.
But with Rasputin, nothing is ever simple.
Nothing's ever simple. According to Yusupov's memoir,
Right.
which is our primary source for these events, Rasputin didn't die immediately.
Okay.
He got up, lunged at Yusupov, and even managed to escape into the courtyard.
Wait, hold on. A man who's just been shot at close range gets up and runs away.
Yeah.
This is where the line between historical fact and
Right.
sensationalized storytelling gets a little blurry, don't you think?
Absolutely. While there's no doubt that Rasputin was shot that night,
Right.
the details of the struggle, his alleged escape,
Yeah.
his supposed superhuman strength, I think all of that should be viewed with a healthy dose of skepticism. Yusupov, after all, had a vested interest in portraying himself as a hero
Right.
who faced down this formidable, almost demonic foe.
So it sounds like he was trying to craft a narrative that justified his actions,
Exactly.
painting Rasputin as this threat that required these extreme measures
Right.
to
Right.
eliminate.
He wanted to convince the public, and maybe even himself, that he had acted in the best interests of Russia,
Yeah.
even if it meant resorting to violence and deception.
So the chase continues. Yusupov and his co-conspirators,
Right.
they pursue Rasputin into the freezing night. What happens next? Do they finally manage to subdue him?
Well, according to Yusupov's account,
Yeah.
they fired several more shots, finally bringing Rasputin down.
Okay.
They bound his body and disposed of it in the Neva River,
Oh, wow.
hoping to conceal the evidence of their crime.
That's a pretty gruesome scene. And it raises a lot of questions about the reliability of Yusupov's version of events. I mean, were there any witnesses to corroborate his story? Did the police even investigate the circumstances surrounding Rasputin's death?
The official investigation was somewhat perfunctory, likely due to the political sensitivities
Okay.
surrounding the case. The Tsarina, of course, was distraught over Rasputin's death,
Yeah.
but public opinion largely sided with Yusupov. He was seen by many as a liberator.
So Yusupov essentially got away with murder.
Pretty much. He was placed under house arrest for a time,
Okay.
but he and his family eventually fled Russia after the Bolshevik Revolution.
Right.
He later wrote his memoir,
Yeah.
which became a bestseller,
Right.
further solidifying his version of the Rasputin assassination
Oh.
in the public imagination.
So it seems like he successfully controlled the narrative,
Yeah.
shaped his legacy as the man who rid Russia of this dangerous and corrupting influence. But what about the physical evidence? I mean, didn't they perform an autopsy
They did.
on Rasputin's body?
And the autopsy report revealed some interesting details.
Okay.
It confirmed that he had been shot multiple times. Right.
But it also found no trace of poison in his system.
So the poison cakes might have been more fiction than fact.
Yeah, a detail embellished by Yusupov to enhance his story.
It highlights the challenges that we face when trying to reconstruct historical events,
Right.
especially when our primary sources are accounts from those who are directly involved
Right.
and may have had motives to distort the truth.
Exactly.
So we've got this controversial figure, a dramatic assassination,
Yeah.
and a whole lot of unanswered questions.
Yeah.
It seems like the mystery surrounding Rasputin's death
Mhm.
is almost as compelling as the man himself.
Exactly. It speaks to our enduring fascination with figures like Rasputin,
Yep.
those who operate on the fringes of power, who challenge societal norms,
Yeah,
and who leave behind this legacy shrouded in myth and speculation.
right.
But the story doesn't end with Rasputin's death. He had a daughter, Maria,
Right.
who lived through these very tumultuous times
Yeah.
and carved out her own unique path. Yeah, and her story, I think, offers a different perspective on the legacy of the Mad Monk
Right.
and the impact he had on those closest to him.
Her story is truly remarkable. Imagine living in the shadow of such a notorious figure,
Yeah,
navigating the upheaval of revolution,
right.
and then reinventing yourself in a completely different world.
So that's where we'll pick up in part 3 of our deep dive.
Okay.
We'll explore Marie Rasputin's life, her struggles, her triumphs,
Mm,
and what her story tells us about the enduring power of a name
right.
and the complexities of family legacy.
And we'll consider this broader question of
Yeah,
how we separate fact from fiction
right.
when it comes to historical figures like Rasputin,
Yeah.
whose lives have become so intertwined with myth and legend.
So we've explored the life and the myths, the assassination of Grigory Rasputin. But as we hinted at in part 2, the story doesn't just end with his death. There's another chapter, and this one focuses on someone who lived in his shadow, his daughter Maria.
Yeah, and what's so fascinating about Maria's journey is how she navigated the aftermath of her father's notoriety and the fall of the Romanov dynasty.
Yeah, talk about a challenging start to life.
It must have been incredibly difficult to
Yeah.
try and forge your own identity with that kind of baggage,
Yeah.
especially during such a turbulent time in Russian history.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, she and her first husband, after fleeing Russia following the Bolshevik Revolution, they lived a rather nomadic life
Okay.
until his death in 1926. And left to support her two daughters, Maria made a very surprising career choice:
Okay, what's that?
lion taming.
Lion taming. That's quite a leap from the world of Siberian mystics and royal
Yeah,
courts.
it is.
What prompted such a drastic shift?
Well, it speaks to her resilience
Hmm.
and adaptability. Perhaps she saw it as a way to kind of reclaim her own narrative,
Okay.
to defy expectations and forge this path independent of her father's legacy.
She joined the Bush Circus,
She
right?
did.
And eventually ended up performing with Ringling Brothers in America.
Yeah.
I can only imagine the headlines. Daughter of Mad Monk Tames Lions.
You know, and she often embraced that connection, even using it to her advantage.
Really?
There's a famous anecdote where, you know, when she was asked about being in a cage with wild animals,
Yeah.
she replied, "Why not? I've been in a cage with the Bolsheviks."
Wow. That's a powerful statement. It speaks to the trauma
Yeah.
and upheaval she experienced, but also her strength
Mhm.
and her wry sense of humor, it sounds like.
And I think it also highlights how her father's notoriety continued to shape her life,
Mm-hmm.
even as she tried to create her own path. You know, the name Rasputin
Yeah.
carried a weight, a mixture of fascination and infamy
Sure.
that followed her across continents.
Makes you wonder about the psychological impact of growing up as Rasputin's daughter.
Yeah.
Did she embrace his legacy or did she try to distance herself from it?
Based on the accounts we have, it seems like a complex mix of both. You know, she acknowledged his influence on her life,
Mm-hmm.
but she also carved out her own identity, one that defied this, you know, this easy categorization.
And her life was anything but ordinary, even beyond the lion taming. She survived a polar bear attack,
Oh, wow.
later settled into a more, I guess, mundane existence as a hospital worker and then a factory worker.
It is a fascinating contrast to the opulence and
Yeah.
drama that surrounded her father's life.
Yeah.
And yet, even in those seemingly ordinary roles, she couldn't entirely escape the shadow of his legacy.
Right. So what's the takeaway from Maria's story? What does it tell us about the power of family history
Yeah.
and the ways in which the past can shape the present?
Well, it highlights this enduring nature of a name,
Mhm.
how even in death, a person's reputation can cast this, you know, long shadow over the lives of those who come after. Maria's story is really a testament to her resilience, her
Mhm.
ability to navigate a world that constantly reminded her of her father's, you know, controversial past.
It also reminds us that history is not just about the big events and the famous figures. It's about the personal stories,
Yeah.
the individual journeys that often get overlooked or overshadowed by the grand narratives.
Right. Maria's story really encourages us to look beyond those sensational headlines and consider the human cost of these historical events. You know, the ripples that extend far beyond the immediate players.
Well, listeners, we've reached the end of our deep dive into the world of Rasputin. It's a tale of ambition, scandal, and ultimately tragedy. But it's also a story about faith, desperation, and this enduring human need to make sense of the inexplicable.
Yeah, we've seen how truth can be so intertwined with fiction
Right.
and how a single figure can become larger than life, both in reputation and in myth.
Absolutely.
And we've explored how those myths can shape not only our understanding of the past,
Yeah.
but also the lives of those who come after.
If this deep dive has sparked your curiosity, we encourage you to explore further. Delve into primary sources, compare different accounts, and draw your own conclusions about the man behind the myth.
And if you enjoyed this journey through history,
Yeah.
be sure to subscribe and join us for future deep dives into equally fascinating
Hmm.
and thought-provoking topics. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep learning.